This is Taranis AcreForward, the ag industry's most thought-provoking podcast. Listen to interesting people as we go in-depth into the issues affecting crop advisors, growers, and farm communities, uncovering the truth about the ag business and using technology to prepare for the unforeseeable. Ready to explore the future? Let's dig in.
I'm here today with Dr. Scott Downey. Now, Dr. Downey, I'm going to have you introduce yourself just here in a moment. But what we're going to be talking about today is probably wide-ranging, and you're an expert in many things with quite a background. Currently, you are the director of the Center for Food and Agricultural Business and a professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics at Purdue. You're also an author, you're published. You have a variety of things that you've accomplished and done. So I want to say thank you for joining us, but I also want to welcome you. So Dr. Downey, tell us just a little bit about yourself and your background as we get started here in the conversation today.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here, and anybody who's listening to this, I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I'll try my best not to disappoint you. As you said, Mike, I've got a pretty varied background. Even though I'm an academic, I really don't fit in anywhere because I, unlike most of my colleagues, didn't go straight from undergrad to master's to PhD. So I started out in industry in a banking career for 15 years before I decided to pursue my degree. I actually fell in love with teaching, and that's what brought me here to what I'm doing today and have done for the last 25 years or more. Oh my goodness. So I teach in our sales and marketing program and coordinate our certificate in industrial selling. So I teach students from all majors across the campus, including engineers in a pretty big class. And I'm in the family business. My dad actually founded the center that I direct today and was one of the first instructors at the college level of sales courses in the world. And so for me, it's a privilege to be able to kind of continue that legacy. And while I'll never quite live up to what he did, I do my best. And hopefully we each have made our own contributions to that.
No, absolutely. And what an honor it is to have that connection with your father. And if you think about all those that really motivate us and have contributed to what we bring to the table today, particularly when we think about ag. I will just say quickly, at Purdue, that's just a fine institution. Is there anything specific for those hearing you talk about industrial selling and sales and marketing? What sets Purdue apart? You know, why should somebody come in and see Dr. Downey in this program versus maybe IU or other universities in the area or across the states?
Mike, I didn't expect you'd swear at me like that on this podcast. Look, we are fortunate here in the state of Indiana and really in the Midwest that we've got a lot of great institutions, and each one of them brings some unique things. Truly, I think one of the things that really makes us unique here at Purdue is the focus on agriculture and specifically agribusiness. We are one of the few programs left in the country that actually offers degrees in farm management, which I think keeps us grounded, literally and figuratively. In addition to having newer technologies, I think just within the last couple of weeks, we were cited as having one of the top ag and biological engineering programs in the country, and are in the top 5 in the world for what we do in agribusiness. So, those things make us unique. And I think that gets demonstrated in our leadership. Much of the leadership of the university has come out of the ag program. Our student leaders almost always come from ag degree areas, which is a testament to the high quality of the people we bring in. And of course, our job is just not to screw them up while they're here. So it's a nice bar to have.
No, absolutely. Purdue is is just one of the most amazing universities in the world, and it's a big part of the reason, working here at Taranis, that we selected this area of Indiana for our headquarters globally. Just the connection, what Purdue does, and there are other fine universities, of course, but Purdue's, I think it's really a special place, and there's not many others that even come close to what it provides. So before we get into ag and selling and agriculture, because kind of you talked a little bit of agriculture being different, and I want to tease that out, but I noted something. So you're a professor at the Department of Agricultural Economics. Are you an economist, or do you think your specialty lies elsewhere, Doctor?
Yeah, so we have about 40 faculty here in our department, and all of them are economists or ag economists, except me. As I said, I don't fit in. I am the only one who's a behaviorist. And so a lot of times when I'm in front of audiences, I'll ask how many people have degrees in ag economics, and people will raise their hands, and I will ask them, okay, so what is economics? And they stare at me with blank stares, mostly because economics is one of those terms we throw around, but most of us don't remember what we learned during our college degrees. So I let them off the hook pretty quickly, and I'll remind them that economics is based on the fundamental principle that humans make rational decisions to maximize utility. The difference between behaviorists and economists is that behaviorists are not bounded by humans being rational.
There we go.
And so we look at observable behavior. That's the fundamentals of behaviorism, is observing human behavior to tell what goes on in the human brain, as opposed to assuming that brain is logical. So my best example of this is that it is perfectly acceptable for me as a human to want to lose weight and eat pie at the exact same time.
Absolutely.
So that really blows the logic behind the idea that humans make rational decisions. Now, economists will say, in all fairness, that profession has moved much more towards a behavioral path over the last 10 or 15 years. Most of the Nobel Prizes in economics have gone to behaviorists because we do kind of bring a little bit more reality to that today. And besides, whatever they want, they can throw it into this idea of utility. It's just, in research, we call that the error term. So whatever doesn't fit our model, we throw it into error. And that's what economists do.
No, I like that. And I want to tease this a little bit, because you focus on professional selling. And again, we'll get to agriculture, but it is very scientific to observe behavior and observe actions, because that's what we don't always know intent, sometimes even in ourselves. Like, I think about selling when we work at it, and I think about the people we deal with. The heart sometimes knows things that the mind's trying to figure out, right? And you try to put it in words, but the heart and your impulses and the way you manage these things, sometimes even when you're asked a question. I have 5 daughters and 1 son. So having 6 kids, I see a lot of personalities. And I have my 17-year-old, my 16-year-old. Sometimes I'll say, how are you feeling? Do you know why you're feeling this way, or why this is happening? And it's amazing. It's educational. Teenage years are hard, but I think teenage girls particularly are honest. I don't know why, but it's how I feel. And that hit me hard as a professional, because I realized I think sometimes we're confident that we know why we do things. We don't really think about it. So when you think about professional selling, or you think about how you look at this, the books you write, how you analyze it, how do you look at the behaviors and the philosophies to inform selling? What is selling, and how do behaviors play into that?
Yeah, so coming at things from a human behavior perspective, I'm a little unique. Even if we take away agriculture and we just look at researchers who do research and selling, I'm even unique among those groups, because often researchers in my area come from a marketing perspective, meaning that they see sales as an activity that's designed to persuade someone or argue for something, whether it's an idea or product or service. And I understand that those ideas, but I start from the perspective of all human behavior that is driven by what we call a goal-directed approach. And we've known it's well-researched, highly regarded theory about how the human brain works really starts from infancy as being goal-directed. In other words, soon as that baby is born, they are able to assess the gap between the world as they would like it to be and the world as it is. And they assess those gaps, and then they allocate their very limited resources as a baby to bridge those gaps. So they look at their hunger situation. What is my hunger situation like? How would I like it to be? And then they allocate their resources. They expend their energy in a loving household. They draw from an important relationship with their mother to bridge that gap. They don't know they're doing that, but our brains are hardwired into that. And as we grow and become more sophisticated, our ability to kind of put words around those gaps and to put kind of context around those gaps and to define resources beyond just relationships, which is where we start, to think about gaps in knowledge or think about time or money as a resource. And when we put all of those things together, our job as salespeople is to help customers who have identified a gap between the world as they would like it and the world as it is, and they're ready to put resources towards filling that gap. Our job is to help them in that process. The sales area has evolved since the 1950s, where the focus really was on persuasion, to one where our success today really comes down to our ability to help somebody accomplish their goals, more than it is even to provide them with solutions or to persuade them that what we bring is something that they have to have. And it's kind of through that philosophy and that kind of theoretical foundation of human behavior that I think about things like management. So I work not only with salespeople, but also with sales managers to help them understand how they can maximize their effectiveness as managers. That's very much a human-to-human thing, just as we call it a parallel process. Just as salespeople work with their customers, managers must work with their salespeople. And that's a cascading chain. In other words, many farmers are extremely proud of the work they do in serving the needs for satisfying a food need in the population, or being stewards of the ground. And so that idea of service is one that I take kind of through that whole system of creating value. So I very humbly am proud of what I do in agriculture as an educator, in that I think I play a role in trying to kind of raise that service component across everything that we do, and trying to focus not on the persuasion and manipulation parts of selling. Other people do that, but much more on the service side.
Right. Those techniques tend to be superficial, transactional, mirroring techniques, fake, or even relationship selling isn't really relationship selling. Like, we have to go deeper. So I'm thinking, you focus on professional selling, and I'm hearing the expertise. But we talked about agriculture, and now agriculture is a big bucket, so we can narrow it a little bit here to row crop, like open field row. Think corn, bean, maybe cotton if you want to expand a little bit, and think about the value chain from, the input provider down to retail to the grower. And I think a lot about the retailer as well, because I think when you look at the rural community, something we've thought about, when we set our process and our solutions as a company, you could focus on the tech, but we focus on the humans. And we understand the small percentage of the population. that actually lives and services agriculture down to the grower level. They exist historically to move big, heavy piles to smaller piles, logistics. But that's not all that is done. And I think you're ahead of the curve in many ways in the things that you're doing, because the value chain in our world has changed. There's fewer people involved in agriculture, and there's fewer people physically or professionally capable to serve a grower's needs. So with that backdrop, what I'd like to ask you, and I'll dive a little bit into, and we'll get to retail in a minute. You have a passion for agriculture. When it comes to professional selling, what's unique to agriculture and what's universal? Like when you think about agriculture, what makes it different to sell and achieve, like understand the needs, achieve these goals mutually? What's unique? What are the challenges maybe to make agriculture special or different from your perspective?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, every industry that I've worked in, and I work mostly in agriculture, but I've also done some other raw materials, oil and gas. I work a fair amount of my time is spent in the food industry. One of the things that makes agriculture specifically unique is that while every industry talks about the importance of people, it really is fundamental to what we do. There still are relationships. Now, often those relationships are social in nature, and we can have a conversation about whether sales relationships are social relationships or business relationships. I tend to think it's a blending of both of those in agriculture, in the work that salespeople do. But the decisions that are made, even among really large farming operations, are often still primarily made by people. There's a few organizations that have formal procurement and they put specs out, but even in organizations that tend towards that more. And by the way, I would advocate that is a good way for farmers to think about where they obtain their value from, their inputs from. It still comes down to people and what those people are going to do for one another. And can I trust this person to follow through on what they say? Can I trust that this person has my best interests at heart? Is still fundamental to what we do in a way that it's not in many other industries. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. I suspect it's because agriculture is a very dispersed production, as opposed to even on a construction job site. You have people that are all coming together. They're often close to relatively urban areas, but farmers are spread out as the land is, and there's just not very many industries that have that spreading out and dispersion across them. And it makes us more reliant on one another, I think.
Yes.
Plus, we've got risk coming from so many different places that that we don't want that risk to be there within our relationships. We have to be able to rely on one another to get things done.
I couldn't agree more. I was going to ask, do you think it's a greater level or a different kind of dependency? And something that we think about and that I've said a few times is farming, while it's an independent activity and there's a lot of pride in independent decisions and risk, and a farmer wears many hats. It's not just putting crops in the ground, but they have to be self-reliant to a degree, but you miss the actual behavior. And the real behavior is this, in my book, and I want to hear what you think about this, but such a small town, such a small population, when people buy an input, as an example, why do they buy from more than one retailer? Maybe to keep them honest, okay, maybe for a price, but the reality is they're probably related to two of them. If not, they're on the same volunteer fire squad, right? They're helping out on the school board. They're doing all kinds of things. It really is a community effort. And I'm not saying it takes a village, but I am saying when you look at what it takes to produce for a farm, the reliance and why they make purchase decisions is fundamentally unique and different than any other industry I've seen. Do I have that right? Or let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because I think some people listening to this may not know what I'm really talking about, because what do farmers need to buy, and what is the risk, and what is the risk in farming? Why are they dependent, Dr. Downey?
Well, look, uh, man, if we've got farmers listening to this, I don't want to be the one talking about risk because they're the ones who live it every day. I mean, so obviously weather, we are all, our survival depends on weather and resources, both of which the volumes and volatility of have changed dramatically. And that's, so we've got market volatility on the input side, we've got market volatility on the output side, and we've got weather volatility in the production side of things. There is so much within that, and so it's not that we're victims. Our system, it requires our system as a whole to address those issues, whether that's managing financial risk and the inputs of bankers and marketing consultants to help us address those kinds of things, whether it's information from a meteorological service at a university or at a governmental organization that helps us better anticipate what's happening. People who are going to point out what's happening in the world of resources around water and phosphorus and potassium and micronutrients and biologicals, and there's none of us can understand the entirety of that system, and so we have to rely on each other throughout that system to be able to bring it all together. And look, you can take farming and say, well, isn't it just putting seeds in the ground and then running a combine over it, right? And for millions of people around the world who aren't involved in agriculture, it looks that way.
Yes.
And in row crop in particular, how many consumers...
It's so advanced, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
And how many consumers have ever eaten a soybean out of a field or an ear of field corn, right? None, right? It's none.
We're not talking about edamame and sweet corn.
Exactly, right. That's a whole different field. And so they are so far removed from that it's easy to boil that down. And we see this all the time, right? So how do we, in our kind of insular world where we know how complex some of these things are and the depth of knowledge that's required to make decisions today is so high, none of us can be an expert in all of those things. And so one of the things, just to take this back to the sales topic, one of the things that I talk with salespeople about all the time is, because none of us can be experts at everything. There is no salesperson at the input level, at the manufacturing level, at the retail level, or farmer for that matter, who can be experts at all those things. And so therefore, we tend to focus our expertise in those areas where we're most passionate. And if our passion is around agronomy, we get pretty deep in agronomy.
Agree.
If our passion is around engineering and equipment, we get pretty deep there. If our passion is real estate, we really focus on ground.
Yes.
There's so many areas. And if we, in sales, if we as salespeople assume that other people share the same level of engagement in whatever product it is we sell as we do, we've missed in that fundamental function that it's not anybody else's job to be an expert. It's my job to understand how my expertise helps somebody else do the things that they care the most about. And that requires a really deep understanding of other people. And that's the fundamental thing that I think it's always a good sales approach to understand others, but it's a necessary requirement in agriculture.
I couldn't agree more. And there's so many ways I want to go deeper on this. And obviously you have a unique level of depth, but I think there's two conversations from this that are top of mind. One, how's that? Let's talk about ag retail. Again, I said I'd get there, and we have ag retailers listening to this. Like, how does this really change what they need to do, or how is it unique, and who's looking out for them? But I want to point this out. I think many billion-dollar industries make big mistakes on not understanding what you just articulated about agriculture. I believe personally it's the reason ag tech, while it's had a ton of successes, hasn't had the success that outsiders would have wanted, because there's a fundamental misunderstanding of the human behaviors and the complexities that are inherent in the value chain. Which now brings me full circle to, how should we look at the ag retailer in the value chain, and how that person, if you're today, somebody might be hearing this, they're spreading, they're applying, they're making a delivery, but they're responsible for growers that have various skill sets, farmers with various interests. What's unique from your perspective on an ag retailer, and what a crop consultant, sales agronomist, operator should be doing in your experience? What's unique about selling and engaging and servicing that you think would be specific to ag retail, someone serving farmers with inputs and solutions?
Mike, that's a fantastic question, and it's one that I think about every day as we think about how to help salespeople do these things. And there's a couple takeaways that I think are relevant to that question. One, the first thing I would say is just kind of taking us back to what we just talked about philosophically, and maybe making a bridge. 100 years. No, let me go back 100 years. Our job, if you were selling to a farmer, you were primarily bringing them on a new idea. And if you think about some of the early research on innovation and the ways that human beings adopt new technologies was done in agriculture. It was done focused on how farmers adopt new technologies. And for much of our recent history over the last 100 years even, we were still focused on what does the product do? Okay. You think about the impact of either, we could start with machinery technology, but we could real quickly go to glyphosate, right? Or a
GMO trait.
Or a GMO trait, exactly. Breeding, right? We could take any of those things, and the job in the early days of that product is explaining how it works. But the challenge we have today is that the how it works is so science-based in agriculture today that it is really difficult for anybody to understand that without really being passionate about getting down in the weeds with that. But we still train salespeople about products and how those products perform and where they go. And the difference between one set of genetics and another set of genetics, first off, they're often based on the same things. And so we're almost trying to create differences that don't matter if we focus on the product. But if we focus on how does this particular farming operation see the value that they create in the world. And I'm not trying to be philosophical there by saying the value they create in the world, but there are so many. They can focus on efficiency, and that creates value in the world. They can focus on product differentiation and specialty products, and that makes them different in the world. They can focus on financial performance or land stewardship or whatever they want. And it's not their job to understand all of those scientific differences between the products or technologies we bring into the marketplace.
I see.
That's our job, to be able to figure out how does our knowledge of what we do connect to the things that they care about. It's not my job to go explain and help and make them buy in to why my technology is the best or why my product is the best. And that is a relatively new phenomena in our industry. And ag retail is the place where those decisions get communicated. And so for 85 out of the last 100 years, my job in ag retail wasn't to do that. My job was to get the products there. And now it's it's not that my job doesn't include getting the products there, but my job is much more focused today on helping that farmer farm the way they think they need to farm given their assessment of all those risks than it is to try to convince them that I've got the right thing. It's one of the things that makes me excited about, I don't want to say data because it's too much discussion about data, about the inputs to decisions that farmers are having available to them today lets them be way more specific about how they're going to be successful. Specific in the decisions that they make, specific in the processes that they use, specific in the scope of their farming operation, their use of resources, what they do to and with and from the land. They've got so much more. That's the thing that makes it so exciting. But if I think my job in ag retail today is just to sell a product, I've really missed the value that I bring in helping my customer translate all those different options. It's not to explain anymore. It's to assist.
Yeah, I think we get.
How do you see it at Taranis, Mike?
Well, I think it's
You guys have a play there.
We do. I don't like the word data either. Even though we have lots of it, it doesn't matter. What matters is what I think you said something earlier. You can focus on the product or you can focus on the customer's goals. And I think technology, we had an embarrassment of riches over the last 100 years and the speed of innovation. Okay, now I need to understand this chemistry. And we have a company that has a unique position in it, which then you're not focused on the differences in the product. You're focusing on how to use it. And then as that starts, there's more competition. You see more consolidation. There's many other products. And now you're differentiating on this is an isomer, this molecule does this, or same thing with genetics, same thing with traits. And that's been the game from my perspective for the last 20 years. But you have this data space and how we look at it. What data doesn't exist and what data is hard to get? Because this is a complex environment. So what we know is if it comes off the machine, that's been hot. Okay, but then what's it worth? Doesn't mean it doesn't have value, but it becomes commoditized. And that I'm not talking about that from a venture capital or company perspective, just from a utility perspective. Okay, so we can get all this information on your machine, so what? We know what the planter thought it did. Okay, that's good. We know what the combine thinks it got. Okay, that's great. We're tracking as farmers and as advisors, right? That's what retailers really are, advisors, and they have to be specialists. They have to, for you, they got to do this type of advice for this guy because every farmer is different. But here's the big issue. We're still human beings. So once that planter leaves the field, and there's lots of activities in between, and when that combine rolls, we have a very short-term memory, and there's only so much we can handle. So the way we look at it is very simple. If I could have Ring doorbell for your farm, if I could FaceTime the field in a systematic, repetitive way, I'm getting lots of data. That's hard to do, and we're good at it. But the way we look at it is not, okay, so I have great tech. We have in this company people that use artificial intelligence and capture and acquisition that will amaze you. We can put thousands of drones out, we can capture, we use satellite, and we're doing this on millions of acres. But who cares? What really matters is that advisor that hears this. You said something about knowing people's goals. I can't do that, and I can't demonstrate that I know that if I don't know what's happening in the crop response through the season, the environmental factors, and then the human factor. How did I do this? So I think of it, it's more like athletics, which is very complicated. There's so many variables. So we look at it as game tape for the acre, right? We're literally recording at a leaf level what's happening. And while that's amazing, again, Dr. Downey, so what? The so what is this? We're actually bringing people together to understand how all these decisions and all these behaviors change the outcome and how we can improve that. This is season after season stuff as much as it is in season. So I don't know if that helps. But that's how we're kind of looking at the issue. And we just build technology to support that. So one year we made drones. right? We've made them. We've made pods. We've made the ability to go acquire this. We just remove obstacles, but at the heart of what we do, it's really, I want to understand your goal, and I think we can improve as an industry for that. We still don't know how our behaviors and what factors influence the outcome on the farm. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think it's so difficult to understand, why did I get the outcome I got? The seedsman will tell you it's the seed, right? The crop protection will tell you that you should have or you did use the fungicide, right? So but we all know that it's much more complicated, and how do we show that value? So I think tech is really hard for people to get their head around, because there's been so much under promise and over deliver, because we focus on the tech and cutting out the middleman as a result of the tech, right? And efficiency at the expense of efficacy and the advisor. And I think that's what makes what we're doing and what we focus on a little bit unique, is that we believe that community, we're going to bet on that community. And the more information that people can share, it creates more value for them, and they get that attributed to what they do. I think value attribution for the average retailer is one of the most elusive things today.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you just said a mouthful. Yes, attribution. What caused what? That's what attribution means, right? And so
yes,
to what do we attribute any change on our farm happening? We've gone through in agriculture, in a long history, for millennia, the innovations in agriculture were biological, use of the horse primarily.
Yes.
Then we moved to the physical, right? The equipment. Then we moved to the chemical.
Yes.
And the next one is knowledge. It's not even technology. It's the knowledge part, not the tech part, that is going to make the difference, right? And the challenge with knowledge is, Mike, I know how smart you are. My capacity is not even anywhere near what yours is, but even between the two of us, there's a limit to how much knowledge we can hold in our brains. And so we've always thought of knowledge as something that's here, but the thing that's exciting now that tech enables is that knowledge is now here.
I see.
And so it's not enough for me to know or for you to know. We have to be able to have ways to communicate that. And data is the input into our ability to understand things so that we can talk about them better and do things better. We can attribute more effectively. We can say, if you change this by this much, you get this much change. Previously we were talking about, if you change this by this much, you'll get this much change.
Absolutely.
So they're gone. That is,
Yep.
It's how do we find these little things? And the reason tech gets so exciting is not because of each of those little things. It's because technology will give us the ability to look at a lot of those little things together and see what happens beyond the ways that any of us individually can look at them. Because, we are quickly moving into a space where if you are a consulting agronomist or a retail agronomist wanting to communicate the value of products, a package, a prescription to your customer, you're not, as an agronomist, going to be able to do it.
I think this is the big thing, and we think about what we provide in value. When you have, say, 30 growers that you care for, which you should be, right? You need to know them so you can care and serve. You don't need to be collecting all this data, marking notes. That data needs to be collected at scale. But let me just plus it up a little, because you're a behaviorist. Data's great, but if I can show you a picture that's on your farm and we can look at it together, the data is a manifestation or an interpretation of what's in that image. But people able to look back at an actual image on the farm and see the data that's been produced, I think it creates an attraction, but it creates something that we can't define. And I think that's really the problem, is we're trying to define what I believe. There's a science to this, Dr. Downey, but we call it an art because it's something the brain can't fully understand. And I think it gets in that community knowledge, or that that knowledge you're talking about. I think there's something deeper here that when you bring pictures and you can show that value, yes, there's scale, but I think there's something about relationships where people can talk about their goals when you can look at the problem or look at the opportunity.
And it has to be that discussion. It's the cool, again, if I'm that retail agronomist, I'm not worried about not being able to explain every little piece of value, because at the end of the day, that's not the job. The job is to know that farm that I'm taking care of at a level of depth. And here I don't mean that farm just being the agronomy. That's a really important part of it.
Yes.
Knowing their access to water or their over access to water, knowing their future plans and the next generation that's coming in and how far out they need to think, knowing their risk tolerance, right? All of those things have come in to my ability to interpret what that data tells us in a way that allows that farmer to make a good decision for them. And so the people part of this actually becomes more important, not less. But we are visual. Humans are visual by nature.
Yes.
Having data, it isn't the way that we've made decisions in agriculture for millennia. It is visual that we do it, and tactile.
That's right. Yes.
So having those inputs and being able to harness those inputs and interpret those inputs, interpret complex imagery.
Yes.
Wow, that's all what we're all going to be focused around, right?
No, this is all we have in my mind. I've been doing this for a little while now, and this conversation's making me just go a little bit deeper in. It's really, when you can see it and talk about it and it's clear, you're building something that's a little bit different that data can't define. The data still has a place, but you're actually building a conversation and you're letting the community and the power of that advisor and the grower build on itself in ways that we can't imagine. I thought about this. So ChatGPT and this OpenAI stuff, I did an exercise the other day, because we think about what we automate. It was like, oh, you're automating me out of business. I said, hey, if I have a cornfield planted in West Central Indiana with this weed pressure, with these species, which, by the way, we know that. For any farm we help a retailer service, we know it to that level, species, severity. And so I'm going to pause for a minute, because if you don't know us, that sounds insane that we know that on millions of acres and that retailers have these tools. But the reason I say this is I just put in the prompt, imagine you're an agronomist and you're a weed specialist. What is the yield impact for those weeds left unattended, and what are the solutions? And literally in a second, it wrote a full-out email with the rates, the products, and what it believed the yield impact to be on those cornfields if Palmer amaranth is left unchecked. If it's at 25%, it's this. If it's 5%, it was amazing. And now people hearing this, Dr. Downey, oh, well, that replaces me. No, it doesn't, because there's lots of stuff that's missed. But at the end of the day, you go to McDonald's, you know what, or an ATM, some of the tasks that can be better for people are replaced. But you still go, like my parents go to Chick-fil-A every day now, all right? And they go, yeah, you could automate the ordering process, but they know the manager, they talk to people. And so I still think there's things that have even greater value, but as people were reluctant to step into that. So do you think people are afraid of AI, afraid of technology? How do you see this kind of changing what we do?
So I've been really fortunate to work in this space a lot in agriculture over the last couple of years. And I find both on the buying side and selling side, there are people who are scared is the wrong word. Nobody in agriculture is scared of anything, darn it.
Sure.
but maybe concerned. Maybe we'll just use the word concerned about where that might go. And it's pretty superficial to say that any of us is going to be replaced. First off, when we can get to that, we are in like step 4 of 1 billion steps in terms of machine learning and AI. So imagine if it can do that now, how quickly it becomes overwhelming.
Yes.
And nobody's going to be able to interpret that overwhelming nature of, first off, it's not just Chat GPT, right? Now there's literally a 1,000.
IBM's Watson's been doing this for a long time. We forget it. Musk is putting another one out there. You still have the problem with input and output on these tools, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Remember, Microsoft had the little paperclip guy.
Clippy,
right?
Yes. Yes.
And you know what Clippy did? He did the exact same thing, right? He made observations based on the data and then would make recommendations. It's not new stuff. And we all made fun of Clippy. Well, ChatGPT is just the next Clippy. It's nothing to be afraid of. Book editors didn't get put out of business because of Clippy, right? In fact, Clippy wound up going away because he wasn't good enough at some things and he didn't engage people well enough to be able to actually impact their behavior in positive ways. It was fun, interesting, and there's not any technology today that I see replacing. It becomes a new tool. How are we going to use the tool? But some people today are nervous about what is new, and I think some of that is maybe it's a little bit of fear of the future, but I think it's more concern about what we might lose and give up in that process.
I agree. I think it's more about identity. Like, what is the value I bring?
And tradition. And look, we are conservative by nature. We want to conserve those good things that are part of it.
Yes.
I do have the fear that, whether you buy in today to that technology and you say, I'm going to be on the cutting edge, and Mike, whatever Taranis brings next, I want to know before it comes so I can get ready for it because I'm so excited about it.
Yep.
Or you're on the opposite end of that spectrum and you say, look, in my lifetime on my farm, by God, we are never going to do that. No matter which way you are in that,
right.
For an ag retailer, it doesn't matter. And the reason I say that is because however your customer wants to be served, your focus has to be on how they want to be served and adapting whatever information they're comfortable at today in that conversation with them and interpreting that information, however that is. Look, technology is going to be here. Once you see that light bulb, there's a race to get there and that it is going to impact productivity. There's no way that it can't. It's not something to be afraid of. It's just something that is going to be, and you can determine where you want to adopt it or where you don't. But from an ag retail, from a sales perspective, your effectiveness, and in fact, the ability to retain rural communities that employ people who advise farmers is impacted by our ability to know what that individual farmer wants to do on their farm.
Yes.
It's not about the product I bring. It is about how I use all of those tools. And I need to, if I'm an ag retailer, I have to accept that this world is changing and help my customers prepare for that at whatever speed they feel comfortable at taking that risk on their farm, right?
I fully agree. I think the value chain is going to continue to change. I think many corporations make some bad bets or have on that with assumptions. But what I know is the individuals that serve farmers and that have this knowledge, no matter what that paradigm or that structure is, will have the value. We bet on people, right? The people. So wherever they're going to sit, that value is going to be provided by them. We need to give them the information, the ability, the tools, so they can help farmers achieve those goals the way that farmer wants it done. And that's really I don't know that we've done a good job as an industry doing that. And I think we're at a unique spot. And I really believe you're going to see, to your point, I like what you said. Let's move away from ag tech. Let's talk about knowledge. And I got to do some thinking on that for our company and what we do. But I do think if you're an agronomist listening, like the first thing there's a drone scouting. What do you need me for? Do you really think you can scout millions of plants and then articulate what you saw and see all the defoliated leaves? Let us do that so that you can make sure that the right product at the right time and the right solution and the risks and everything around doing this with this hybrid or this variety makes sense for that farmer year in and year out. And if that grower's concerned or that farmer's concerned about the legacy, or they're concerned about the land value, or they're concerned about maximizing yield, whatever those things are, I still think, even with AI, ag is so complex with biology, chemistry, weather. It's more complex than medicine. I really believe it. And when you see that, I think it's going to take a long time, and the art's going to be bringing all these inputs together so we can understand the output. So I don't know that there's a reason to be afraid, but I would say, how hard is it to hire people in rural America? The retailers that choose to get ahead of the curve are going to attract and give people good jobs in rural communities they want to live in, but they're going to be the employers of choice if they lean into this versus cautiously look at it. And that's what we're seeing is a big difference is we know the retailers that are leaning in, and we're kind of a hallmark for these are the ones that will be growing tomorrow because they're attracting the right people. They have the right tools. They know they have to compete and really drive for service and understand their customers better. We have so much passion around that, and I'm just glad to hear you kind of talk about it. It's amazing, though, the fear of technology that people express. And I think we all do it if we're honest and we look at our lives and our roles.
There's a really key component of this, I think, Mike, and that is that's a fundamental change we have to accept about ourselves, and that is we have to start from humility. In sales, in ag sales, we have for many, many years been able to, in our own minds, play the role of savior to the farmer.
Yeah,
I have the solution that is going to make you successful, farmer. And look, farmers know not one of us has that. But for us to be able to accept that we are going to play, each one of us, a small role in some impacts that we have on the farm, as opposed to being the white knight that comes in and saves because our technology is so much better than everybody else's.
Yes.
That's not going to be the role that we have. We've got to get comfortable saying, I can't know it all. That's true whether you're a farmer, true whether you're a salesperson, true whether you are a researcher at a manufacturing organization making chemicals or genetics. We have to recognize we know this much and we need help. And when we get that help, it's got to come from other people who also have access to their small pieces of knowledge, and we can bring those things together to do bigger things. And it's fundamentally different than who we've historically been. And it's easy to kind of fool ourselves when we're as dispersed as we are to think, I got to do it on my own. But we're not going to be able to.
No, this is fantastic.
In any other area.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. And I'm thinking about just all these wise words you've shared, Dr. Downey. And I think something you just said encapsulates the root of everything we just talked about. Use the word humility. And, the Latin of that is humilis, right? It's where means grounded or earth. Couldn't think of a better way to kind of wrap up what we're talking about. If we could literally be grounded in what we know and how we work and serve others and focus on the goals, humility is the number one asset. It's saying no to yourself and understanding the proper sense of your gifts, but working with others. And I think technology and then tips from people like you and then the strategies and what you have on behavior, that's what's going to change what you can then know about your customer and how you can serve them. So before we go, I just want to say, is there anything else, Dr. Downey, that you think of today that if you're an ag retailer or farmer thinking about these things that they need to know that we've not covered? And I will have you back on the program, but I wanted to check in before we depart, say, what else would you like to leave that budding ag retailer advisor thinking about after this conversation today?
Well, look, we've been so philosophical in our conversation, Mike, throwing around these big terms. So I might as well, I might as well give you back one more, and that's gratitude. We've got to be thankful for where we're at and for the customers we have and the field that we get to work in. No, I'm thankful to you, Mike, for having me on today. It's been a delightful conversation.
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. So gratitude, that's another one that I really like. And I really think when we think about our values, That's one reason we're in this industry. But to have Dr. Downey of Purdue and as an author on the AcreForward podcast, it's just a joy. I guarantee you we're going to be asked by the folks listening to do this again. So I want to say thank you in the spirit of gratitude for joining this discussion today. Now, here at Taranis, when we say AcreForward, what we're really talking about is the passion to drive more value from every acre. But I'm going to tweak that a little bit here because it's also to help people fulfill their goals and understand those goals much more clearly and in advance, and then deliver on those promises. So if you are goal-oriented, then you might have an AcreForward mindset. If you want to hear more about these conversations, talk to interesting people, listen to what they have to say in our industry and in from others, check out our episodes and subscribe to the AcreForward podcast at acreforwardpodcast.com. Thank you, Dr. Downey.
Thank you.